Hey there, welcome to episode 82 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We are a Nevada nonprofit, 501c3 public charity, an all-volunteer organization dedicated to, through our official purpose statement, enabling and encouraging ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. They can be our communities locally or anywhere else. Today we're going to speak about points. And if you have been listening to recent episodes of this audio program, you know I've been working on our Agile for Volunteers methodology. Anyone who has ever used Agile or had it used on them is familiar with the usage of story points, sometimes the misusage of story points, a tool for estimation, sometimes misused as a tool for grading and making people feel bad. That's not how they were designed. So let's get started on this, the 10th of September, late at night. It's just literally 9:01 p.m. here in Vegas. Why so late? Oh, the day gets away sometimes. Hopefully nobody sets their watch by when this audio program is published each week. Let us hope not. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you are able to find a episode description. If you peer within, you will find the show notes, a very brief summary of the upcoming program as far as I'm able to predict. I will read that to you, and a collection of links that are relevant and appropriate for today's audio program. I will read the show notes summary. We'll rattle off the links really quickly. I don't want to go too deeply into them because they're relevant to the general topic at hand. But if you want to see what I'm talking about in some way, you can do that. So let's get started. Story points. I'm so excited to get that started. Story points are one of the two least popular aspects of Agile to tackle for our own Agile for Volunteers implementation. The other is this daily stand-up. That's probably the number one least popular, or the bottom of the most popular, which is also optional. But story points are completely misplaced in a volunteer organization without a commercial style need to hit release dates, sort of. So today we're going to talk about what we're going to try instead of the much maligned and even disavowed by the person who came up with them. I'll leave that reading to you. If you poke around, you'll find I came up with story points and they're a bad idea type of articles. They do have a purpose. They have a motivation. It's not completely unreasonable, but there's a vast difference between an idea that was 17. It was either 17 or 18 people, but because one person didn't show up, wasn't able to make it for the launch of Agile back in February of 2001. You know, when you're in a room full of people that are trying to solve a problem that they all know, they all are on the same page, so to speak. Something like story points kind of makes sense. If you cast a very wide net, not everyone is going to see that notion because it is kind of left vague on purpose, and that can lead to trouble, confusion, misuse. The links for today's episode, the first three, are the usual suspects. Our homepage, innovateforvegas.org, all one word, innovateforvegas, F-O-R, spell that out, no digits, innovateforvegas.org. We have a GitHub organization, so that's github.com/innovateforvegas, no spaces, spell out F-O-R, Innovate for Vegas. Our GitHub organization is, if you're not familiar with GitHub, it's just a place where our projects are stored, the files and information, documentation, all that. We have a free team account owing to the fact that we are a nonprofit working on open source software. Open source projects, I should say. Software is only a part of the puzzle that we are assembling. So visit our GitHub organization if you like. We also have the Project ACT organization, ACT, Autonomous Cohort Tessellation. So you can visit github.com/project-ACT, ACT. I keep saying I'm going to figure this out exactly. The dash key is in the number row of most keyboards. It should be next to the 0, to the right of it. Dash. Is dash or hyphen? Not sure. Agile. I could get the key code and map it to the character map and give it a try. Or you can click on the link in the show notes. Agile software development. These are all Wikipedia links. My intention here is to not do a deep dive into the origin stories and intricacies and methodologies and variants and all that. You can do that. And as I always say, Wikipedia is a great place to begin, rarely a great place to end a quest for knowledge. Agile software development on Wikipedia will give some history and notion. Scrum software development. Scrum and Agile are often they're almost considered to be the same thing. Agile takes inspiration from Scrum and extreme programming and some other ideas. I have read and I have talked about reading the Clean Agile book by Uncle Bob, Robert Martin. He was one of those people in the room. He continues to be fairly active in social media, has made many YouTube videos, is a generally interesting character, many stories. So that take is what I've based some of my I guess you could say understanding. The understanding of Agile in so much as I would like to build upon it, not use it as a weapon. So Agile, Scrum, and then extreme programming XP, sometimes it's called XP. Extreme programming has some other ideas that have made their way into the Agile Manifesto and general principles and methodologies. The velocity chart and the burn down chart are things that fall out of the use of what's called story points. Why did I not put a link for story points? That's weird. Hang on, let me call an audible here. Well, story points are based on your product backlog items, which are usually user stories, and story points are assigned to stories in your backlog. These are the things that we have to get done for a project. So when you use points to measure the amount of work that needs to be done, you estimate that in the beginning during iteration planning. You conduct an iteration that's a fixed span of time, sometimes called a sprint. And at the end of the iteration or sprint, you determine how many story points you planned versus how many you actually completed for some definition of completed. Usually there are considerations. What do we consider done? What do we need to accomplish with a particular user story? User story takes the form of, as a podcast listener, I would like to be able to find my favorite podcasts in a variety of places, not only on Spotify. So if you were to implement that user story, maybe you give it 5 story points. At the end of 2 weeks, you're able to now find the podcast in 25 different locations, more coming, etc., like automated, etc., etc. So you've made it easier for people to find the podcast. So as a podcast listener, I am now happy. I'm able to find audio programs that I enjoy more easily in more places. So I can mark off 5 story points in 2 weeks. And so you take a velocity chart, which is an amount of work completed over time, and you should be able to determine kind of a steady state for your team. So you can say, oh, okay, we can finish about, with 10 people, we can probably do 100 story points in 2 weeks. So if you can measure your velocity, and if you know, oh, that took longer for this sprint or iteration, but that was more complicated, or was somebody out sick, or there's a whole variety of ways you can use this to measure. Unfortunately, what I have found is in my travels, project managers will often treat story points as a metric for sort of grading. They were conceived to try to make a team work together efficiently, so you could estimate, like, okay, we'll probably get about this much work done, and then you could kind of find your pace in a measurable way, right? Quantified self is all the rage. If you could somehow place a Garmin or a Fitbit watch or something on a user story, and measure, beginning and end, you'd say, oh, okay, so that's about the rate. You can measure how long it takes you to walk to and fro. Like, it takes me 7 minutes and 48 seconds to walk to the gym or to the store or to walk around the block. Over time, you could say, oh, now it takes me 7 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm getting faster, or I'm feeling better, whatever it is. So you can measure your velocity of improvement, you could say, or the amount of time it takes you to get through a particular task or effort, and you will have some idea when that changes, and you can correlate that with why. So velocity chart, not a bad thing, but too many times I've seen story points be turned into a grading metric, not a sort of team improvement, self-assessment metric. Burn down chart is how much work do we have left to do. So similarly, you should be able to say, we started out with this many story points and we're whittling them away. Obviously, story points can be replaced with something else. But the basic idea is you should be able to look at your burn down chart and see how are we doing? How are we advancing the cause along some sort of timeline, some schedule towards a release date or some other milestone? And the velocity chart should tell you on an iteration resolution. So the burn down chart is like over time, over the duration of your project. A velocity chart should be able to show a comparison, iteration over iteration, whether the team is working efficiently, if they're slowing down for some reason. You can try to look at why. So these are all well and good. And like I said, sometimes these points or what the charts are saying can be slightly misleading if interpreted incorrectly or as not intended, and they can be used as a cudgel. You're not working hard enough. But that's not really the intention. The intention is not to turn into gaming or punishment. It's really just, again, like a Fitbit or a Garmin or Polar, Apple Watch, whatever. The list goes on. Just so you have some sense individually and your team, how are we doing? How are we moving through our day-to-day, our iteration? So that's what they're for. And really, and torque. Why is torque on here? Wikipedia page for torque, R cross F, RF sine theta. It's a force applied at a radius. Think pedals. The pedals are mounted on pedal arms. They're attached to a gear. The gear has a radius. There's a chain that's attached to a different gear with a different radius. So you get the effort, the force of your foot, whatever you put on the pedal. And as you rotate the pedals on the front gear, you're applying a torque, not only through the pedal arms, but thanks to the gear ratios multiplying the torque. And you end up with some sort of an output. That will come up later. So moving along, our Agile for Volunteers prototype is a work in progress today. It probably will be for a while, and it should be composable. For volunteers, the possibility of having daily stand-up meetings is sort of silly. So that's not even a notion. Anyone can meet if they want, but that's not built in. Like, that's not an expectation. That's not an expectation to set and then be to lead to disappointment, I suppose. So yeah, no daily meetups, but an emphasis on communicating before, during, and after, and all that. So that's a different take. But anyway, today we're talking about points, though. But a little update: I'm working on documentation so that people will have a clear sense. So there's always more to write to clarify intent when it comes to something like this. A first version of an issue tracking workflow is in place and being put to use to manage plans, tasks, bugs, and defects, and maybe some linking, which I've sort of realized. Anyway, I'll get to that. Automation tool plans to manage component project repositories and initiatives, issue maintenance, team maintenance. So there's just a few things because we are making heavy use of GitHub and our gratis team tier. Thank you, GitHub, Microsoft. We have some free stuff at our disposal to make use of. So trying to make use of that and to make it easier to manage initiatives. Initiatives are collections of component projects. The projects could be software, they could be hardware, they could be graphics, they could be music, they could be documentation, they could be localization where you translate from one language to another, and so on. So an initiative is a collection, a big umbrella with component projects in it, under it. So managing all that, if we can do some automation, it should make consistent and trouble-free administration and oversight of initiatives and particular initiatives, component projects, hopefully a little bit easier, a little bit more transparent. We are testing out our first iteration. We're in it right now, at long last. I talked about this a few weeks ago. Oh, we should just do an iteration. But the iteration is really intended to test the workflow, not the work, if that makes sense. So as I speak into this microphone, there exists a collection of planning tasks we have the hierarchy we are using for Agile for Volunteers breaks a initiative into themes. These are Agile terms you'll find in different descriptions of Agile. Themes are made up of epics. Epics should be sized to not take up too many iterations or sprints. So we use a 2-week iteration or sprint. So if you can fit one epic into one sprint, great. But epics really make an attempt at grouping features into proximal groups so that these 10 features kind of go together. So they're part of an epic. And again, these are terms you will normally find in Agile discussion. And then your epic can be broken down into features. Features can be broken down into user stories. Wait a minute, what is that? User stories, features? What is this? That sounds confusing. If you have a light switch in your home, hopefully you do, there's a feature where you can turn on a thing by moving the light switch in one direction. And there's another feature where you can turn it off. That's the typical use case. But you could say, so the feature is toggle power on when switch is one position, toggle off in the next position. So you can make that one feature as a toggle. You can make it 2 features if you want to make your light switch a little bit more robust and flexible. Defer implementation details to later. So the user story would be, as a person, as a user, as a person with limited mobility, limited dexterity, I need to be able to operate my light switch without touching it. So this may be a variation on a feature, but you don't need to specify completely a feature for every user story. So the insertion of a feature enables the kind of a summary view, if you want to say the genus, if you're a fan of the animal kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. The genus is the feature and the species is the variant for a particular user story, a user case, a user scenario, particular wants, needs, desires, limitations, etc. So you could have any feature implemented for the generic case, and then you may find right up front, you may find over time that, we didn't account for someone who, the example I give often is the Open Transit project, one of our open source projects initiatives now. There's an application from Montreal, Canada called the Transit App, and I've spoken to riders of the Regional Transit Commission for Southern Nevada, RTC SNB, riding on the buses that RTC operates, our public transit system, and they say, I can't see the app. I have not great vision, not quite legally blind, but not able to drive a car, not able to read small type. So the feature set of the transit app is okay. I will not spend this episode maligning that thing, but there could very well be a user story version or a variant of many of the features that say, as a user with vision impairment, as a user with complete lack of vision, legally blind or completely blind, you would think if you're developing a public transit application that you would just sort of automatically account for users, consumers of public transit services, people with a variety of limitations. That's why they are not driving cars. It's not just that they don't want to or don't own a car, but you could account for a specific user cases, user scenarios. Generally, accessibility should be designed into most things nowadays. That's kind of a problem that's been solved. So shame on them for not having user story implementations for certain things like, oh, I can't read the schedule. Like, oh yeah, oh, what were they thinking? This is an app not for you. It's for the people who can see just fine. So that's always annoying. But so we're testing our first iteration, like I said. One person on the check ride, that's me. I've conceived of the workflow. I've implemented the GitHub-based issue forms. So there's kind of you create a new theme or epic or feature or user story. You connect them together. You indicate objectives and key results. For the user story, we lean in heavily to the Agile notion of the 3 C's, the card, which is you could literally take the issue and write it on an index card, maybe different colors for like a vision impaired rider, a rider that uses a scooter or what do you call it? Not a scooter, something like a wheelchair. So limited mobility, limited vision, and so on. So you can create these user stories and connect them together and then create tasks in a component project. The task is where you implement. So the plan is sort of abstract. We need to be able to account for people who can't necessarily see small, low contrast type presented on a screen, on a mobile device screen or similar. So they should be able to change the size of the text, or we should have a high contrast mode. We should have a nighttime mode so that there may be some night blindness. Got to be able to get home at night. So these are things that you can incorporate into your planning, and you can add them later rather than creating an entire specification. This is one of the Agile upsides. Rather than imagining that we must specify a project for all up front, you may find, oh, we were trying this, and it turns out a lot of people run into a problem when it's dark, fill in the blanks, and then we say, oh, we can fix that. Let's add a user story for vision impairment at night, lack of legibility, visibility, etc. Then you create tasks where you say, oh, okay, I'm going to work on the Android version. I'm going to implement this using accessibility tools, etc., a mobile web app version, a desktop version, etc. So all these are component projects. And since each one may have different civic volunteers contributing to them at different times, it doesn't really make sense to focus on the user story, which is the abstraction used for planning. You can focus on the implementation task in a component project that is a native iPhone application, a native Android application, a progressive web app, PWA, which is usually a mobile web application, HTML and all that, a desktop or a full size or traditional web application, a basic website, the list goes on. So these are all kind of variations on a theme. So by breaking planning and implementation, plans and tasks, into two separate groups, you kind of enable some flexibility in who works on what and when. So by stepping through this first pass, I'll get a feel for, I've already found a couple things that I would like to add, revise a little bit. So that's what I can do. That's Agile for Volunteers should be used to continue development and improve Agile for Volunteers, just like anything else. So if in getting this first iteration up and running, like I said, there are two things. And one of them is GitHub has a feature like project feature that you can attach to a repository, a component project repository, and you can say, oh, here are the number of issues, and here's what people are working on, and here's the timeline, and so it's usable. Can't beat the price. Initially, there was going to be one single top-level project for the initiative. I kind of found out very quickly, like, this gets confusing very quickly. There'll be too many things, too much going on. So if we break down the projects by the GitHub project per component project repository, now you can manage who's working on what on a smaller scale. You can still, you can aggregate everything at the end of an iteration. The iterations can have different dates, right? If you assume that everything has a 2-week iteration starting on the same day, well, what if the people working on the iPhone app want to start their iteration on Thursday instead of Tuesday? So build in some flexibility, build in some more focused production by street, build in some more focused data analysis and visibility. So that's one thing I came away from so far. And then linking, explicit linking. So explicit initiative linking and initiative graph. So it's linked in the initiative graph, so that you can see which component projects are part of an initiative. That's sort of easy to do through kind of indirection, implicit. By making them explicit, we can use some of the same tools we're going to use for issue linking in general, which rely heavily on RDF, Resource Description Framework. And so we'll get into that in other episodes. I've done episodes on DOPE and FOF, description of a project, and friend of a friend. These are applications of Resource Description Framework that will all figure into all this at some point. What is the difference between Agile and Agile for volunteers? Well, Agile was developed by and for software developers, first made public in February of 2001. The people in the room were all software developers. They said, we need a way to make the time and energy we put into software development and our software development teams better at making good stuff, not spending time on specifications. There used to be the prevalent philosophy or approach was called the waterfall method. There are various things about the waterfall method that you can find out for yourself. First was don't use the waterfall method was the thing that someone created. Document, report, survey, whatever it was. Like, it was pointing out the shortcomings, but it was taken as a roadmap. Allegedly, I was not there. So Agile was developed based on some thinking from different existing methodologies. And I mentioned already Scrum and extreme programming and even waterfall, to say, hey, here's some things that we could be doing better. You can, if you want, because I've talked about this previously. I did not include it in the links because only go there if you want to. The Agile Manifesto is very brief. It is literally, like 6 things, sort of left versus right comparison. Like, we prefer this to this. I think it's 6 things or 8. I think it's 6. And then there's I'm not looking at it right now. And then there's a full page linked, not a traditionally typed page, but I think there's like a dozen principles. So that's linked from the homepage. So Agile Manifesto, no spaces, .org. If you go there, you could read the whole thing in about 90 seconds, maybe. It's been translated into a variety of languages. It's fairly minimal. It is a set of principles, not rules. It is often taken to be the way, often misused to grade people, but it's really meant as it's almost like looking at reviewing your game tapes or game reels, or anytime you look at a slow motion replay or something. Agile is really kind of like that. You can look at how your team, you're a member of a team perhaps, or maybe just yourself. How am I doing? How are we making progress on this thing? What can we look at? Where are we slowing down, etc.? And well, as I will get into, that can mean something very different if you are getting paid for your work and there's a stock valuation riding on releasing a product. It starts to become very important. Civic volunteer projects are very different. One of the reasons there needs to be a different take on project management in general, principles, methodologies, etc. The Agile Manifesto, again, is very quick to look over. So if you have not ever seen that, if you've only had Agile applied to you, I don't want to go to the stand-up every day and waste my time and become distracted. You will note there are no stand-up meetings specified in the Agile Manifesto, nor story points. It's principles, not rules, and not concrete implementation details. Although, very clearly, there were some ideas about how to go about accomplishing the principles spelled out in the Agile Manifesto, story points being one of them. Agile is really intended, as it was designed, to be principles and methodology. I think I just said that. To make good outcomes from the work of professional software developers collaborating on some project or part of a project or parts of projects with work days and paychecks and so on. You're probably going to see the same people working with you, definitely through iterations or sprints, and definitely with some sort of a reward every couple of weeks, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, one of those. Some sort of financial incentive. Since there's big money wrapped up in all this, usually in software development, the so-called Agile Industrial Complex has made, that always makes me laugh, has made a complicated maze with several things that leave a bad taste in the mouths of people who like software development. So, I'm a programmer, yay. Oh, wait, I got to deal with Agile and daily stand-up meetings and story points and feeling bad because I didn't finish all my story points and all that stuff. So it can be misused. Agile for Volunteers takes the basic ideas and principles. So start at the Agile Manifesto. Consider reading a book like Clean Agile, Uncle Bob, or something like that, something from Martin Fowler or any of the people that were there to get their take on it. So Uncle Bob says kind of up front, I can't remember if it's in the chapter 1 or before that, like a preface. It says, this is my take. This is not the official take. This is not like the party line. It's his view. And if you've watched him on his YouTube presentations, or he does speaking engagements and events, and so those are on YouTube too. He's got a reasonable approach and it's pretty pragmatic. So you can say, okay, I can appreciate that viewpoint. So we want to apply these notions to anyone collaborating on and or contributing to volunteer initiatives and their component projects, and does not presume that the participants are committed, no paychecks. It's not a job. There's no financial incentive per se. The motivation is something more personal. It has to come from within, maybe a long-term goal, like volunteer now, and then we'll release something that will have some continuing engineering or support that turns into a spin-off of a startup or something. Yeah, you never know. This makes the reason to value this to value this volunteer time, effort, and expertise more clear. So you're not giving someone money. You're basically saying, thank you for spending time on this and your effort and your expertise. Would you like to do it again? And hopefully they say yes. So story points and charts. This is where we get to the meat. Story points are an oft misunderstood element found in agile management approaches where tasks, user stories usually, are assigned some point value as an indication of how much work will be required to complete each task or each user story. If we assign a task, I'm just going to use task and user story interchangeably for Agile because they basically are. So if we assign a task in the form of a user story, okay, so some number of points as a work estimate can be attached. We can find out at the end of one iteration how many tasks and thus how many points each was able to complete, each person. Did I not say person in there? So you take a collection of user stories and you work on them. And if there's a user story that's 5 points, and there's another one that's 10 points, and there's one that's 2 points, you may find at the end of a sprint or iteration, a week or 2 weeks or a month, say, oh, I did 17 points. Maybe that's how many I can do in that period of time. By measuring the number of points per person per iteration and charting points per time and how much work remains over the time, over the project time, not the iteration time, we can make educated and adjustable guesses. That's the important part, adjustable guesses about timelines and schedules and whatnot. Estimation is one of the most difficult things to do, especially it's difficult on any project, but in novel projects. So for example, if you do something fairly complicated, like build a house, estimation can be really tricky. If you build tract homes, if you build 100 houses, if you build 1,000, suddenly it's like, okay, I think we got this. So it's very easy to estimate when you've done things at that scale and that frequently, because it's like you got your supply chains worked out, your order of operations, you got everything running. But if you build a house, then you build another house, time will vary, the different materials, they're probably custom, supply chains are slow, got the countertops, but not the cabinets, so you got to wait, can't put the countertops in without the cabinets. So estimation is hard. So assigning story points to user stories and using those as a way to measure how much you accomplish is a way to figure out how easily, how effectively, how efficiently are the people of this team as a whole team, that's another Agile concept, how well can they move through this collection of user stories per iteration or sprint. And we can all see that. So if everybody can see how everybody's doing, it's not a race, it's not a game. It's that quantified self-feedback that says, okay, I know I can accomplish this much in about that amount of time, plus or minus. You can kind of get a comfortable pace, and everybody gets a predictable sort of effort output metric. You're like, oh yeah, okay, I know you're going to be done with this in 2 iterations, so I'll arrange my effort so that my iteration, the thing I need to finish first will be finished in the first iteration. You'll be done by the second. So we can sort of start collaborating on when we'll try to accomplish things. We can make sure we're not wasting each other's time and so on, but we're getting paid. Yay. The assignment of story points is a team effort. Team effort. So that the points per user story is a consensus estimate. So I don't say, this is probably 5 points. The team should be relatively small. Think 7-ish. Think maybe a dozen. Don't think 50 or 100. So enough people to sit at a table. You can do the 2 pizza rule if you want. The team should be able to go through each user story card. I don't think I finished the 3 C's. Card, consensus. Card, conversation. What's the 3rd C? I said it already. What's the 3rd C? The 3rd C. Okay, I don't have it right in front of me. It's what needs to be done. Confirmation? Is that what it was? I have it in the forms, in the workflow. So if the number of points completed per iteration can be gathered up, right? So you take your user story with the 3 C's. You say, okay, we're gonna assign this one 5 points, and this one will be 7 points. You can use Fibonacci or some other schemes. Fibonacci is to basically say, if you're estimating a value of 10, well, Fibonacci sequence is 1, 1, 2, what is it? 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Anyway, so as you get, and you probably won't go beyond 13 or 21, 13 plus 8. Yeah, I didn't start off thinking, I better do Fibonacci sequence in my head. The idea, though, is to make those estimates wider as you assign a larger value. You're going to be less precise. So a Fibonacci sequence gives you some space. They're not this is the tricky part. They're not intended to be concrete values. They're just like, they're estimates. They put you in the ballpark, right? If you give something 2 story points and you give something 13 story points, it's not exactly 6-ish, 6 to 7 times more, but it's a lot more. One thing you might be able to do while you're sitting here, the other thing might take some research and some real effort. So it's a way. And then at the end of the iteration, you might say, that one is not quite done yet. Maybe it should have been 21 story points, or maybe I shouldn't have taken on that. Maybe I could do 13 story points in a 2-week sprint if I didn't do other tasks. So you can discuss those things. Team. There's no I in team, but there are stories. So the number of points completed per iteration is an indication of how much the team can complete and is the starting point of adjustment and tuning for the next iteration. So you do an iteration, you say, okay, I took 50 points total across a variety of user stories. I was able to complete 32. So next time for the next iteration, I will take 32 points. I will make that my kind of cap, and I'll select the number of stories that I can accomplish in an epic so that they're all at least related in some way. So I won't try to tackle more than I can accomplish. Other members can do the same, and eventually, second, third, fourth iteration, you're humming along. You're like, okay, I know we can do this many story points, and we're all using the same sort of soft metrics to assign story points. So, okay, we're all kind of on the same page. They're only estimates, so they're not really meant to be used as hard grading numbers. You fell 1 point short, and that's not how that works. So you adjust and tune for the next iteration. It's almost like you iterate. But there is a problem with points, unfortunately. Unfortunately, the Agile industrial complex, and maybe just reflexive use of a methodology as a means of oversight and control, unfortunately, have turned the Agile model of simplicity and methodology, it's not rules, it's principles and methodology, right, into a grading curve. If misused, the number of points an individual commits to up front, for this iteration, I will accomplish 50 points. And then at the end, you're like, oh, I only did 30. No, it should be, okay, I accomplished 30. So next time I won't take 50, I'll take 30. And if I can do 30, that's my number. I'll do 30. And then we're all estimating the story points in about the same way. If you change the team out, they might give things different values of story points. And then you might say, oh, I was 30, but that was using the old way. And this is one of the problems with points, is that they're assigned in this, they're quasi-arbitrary, right? Everybody kind of agrees, okay, yeah, this is about 13. In fact, if you read about how to arrive at a consensus value, you kind of almost like Rochambeau, like you throw out fingers or hold up a thing, or you can pull cards from a deck, poker method, so there's all these schemes that will kind of enable like a noisy consensus. So it's not exactly precise. It's like something like 7, because these are not supposed to be hard numbers. If they're misused, it can be a source of stress and frustration, and maybe even feelings of failure, like, oh, I didn't do my points. And even worse, sometimes a project manager who's treating Agile like a measurement system will say, oh, you didn't finish all your points, like make you feel bad. For employees, this is a frustrating thing, but you're being paid, which is the cudgel. We're paying you. You took these points. You should. Luckily, not everyone is quite so heavy-handed with that misuse, but I've seen where Agile is treated as if it's the rules by which we will function, not some guidelines to help us become more effective at building good things, not building because somebody told you to, but being more involved, whole team. There's a whole collection of things that go into this. So it's frustrating. For volunteers, this doesn't work because you're not being paid. Not in the near term anyway, not directly. So you can't say, you didn't finish enough work for this 2 weeks. Well, okay. I get paid the same amount, whether I finish nothing or everything or somewhere in between. Volunteers can come and go. They can sit out for an iteration, like, I'm graduating, my friend's getting married, I'm going on vacation. Okay. And this also can be true in the working world, the paycheck world. So you may have some member of your team who's not there for an iteration. You can adjust your points, your planning of points for the iteration accordingly. They may return for an iteration. So your employee will probably come back from vacation. A volunteer may never come back. They may come back in months. The project may have moved on. The initiative may be completely different. Who knows? And the component projects in which they work may take a variety of different forms, different programming languages, or maybe not software at all. Assigning an estimate of point values to user stories can become an exercise in misdirection. You cannot possibly have all of the variety of non-software development tasks, user stories or features you can't assign points to things that are not in your wheelhouse, in your purview. I don't know how hard this is to do a graphic illustration. I have no aesthetic or graphic editing or creative notion, anything. I don't even know the words to describe it. I got nothing. So I could never estimate those. So someone who's going to tackle a particular, they may not even be around. So when it comes time to, and if you look at how the tessellation project works, the entire notion is to enable someone from the outside to come over and say, oh, I think I could do that. They should be able to assign something like a points value. So rather than having this consensus value that may not, the person doing the actual implementation, the actual work may not have been involved in the planning, they may come along later. They may come along days, weeks, months later and say, oh, I'd be interested in working on that. Assigning points values doesn't really matter in that case. So it's not the way volunteer projects could be managed, but there's still value in telling people that they did accomplish this much as part of a team that accomplished this much and so on. So you don't want to misdirect people by saying, oh, this is only 3 points. And they're like, this was a lot of points. This was not 3. What does 3 even mean? And that's where you go down the rabbit hole. So what can we use instead? I got 3 sections remaining. The burn down chart is burning. So what to use instead? This is a great question, and one that is not easy to answer at all. Like I said, you can find the person that came up with story points, and he's like, I think it was he, because everybody in the room was he. He said, yeah, that's not a good idea. It didn't work. Some people have proposed using workload? No. Oh, I can't remember now. It was not story points. It was basically fractions of it. It was kind of more like the burn down chart, but not using story points as a measure of work or complexity. So really, at the end of the day, the first part of the answer is probably best stated in the famous Dodge. Like, I don't want to give you an answer to that question, so it depends. And it usually does. Volunteers are contributing time, effort, and expertise. Remember those 3 words: time, effort, expertise, overall. And they are contributing these in varying amounts to individual tasks that make up component projects that together make up initiatives. Any given task could vary in context, and again, may not be software development at all. So you can't really treat the same, you can't use the same point-like system. It's not a universal solution, so it depends. And you can't say, do the people that aren't here right now, who may not be locally participating at all, they may not even know about any of these possibilities. They may be in another city, on another planet, who can say? So if they come upon a particular task, or it's like, oh, we need somebody to work on this thing. Oh, I could probably do that. They could read through the description of the user story and compose a task. Like, oh, I need to build a piece of wood furniture to do this. Okay, that leaves me out. I'm not really a woodworking person. So they may say, this person with this expertise may say, okay, I think it's going to take this much time. I'm going to need to do this much work, but I've been doing this for years. So, and these are, again, soft estimates, but they're tangible things, right? Since the individual, or maybe a pair, or maybe a crowd, maybe a whole gaggle of people want to take on 1 or 2 tasks. Like, we have to move a couch. Okay, that might take 2 people. Intending to tackle a task may not be determined until the actual task is taken on for an iteration. So you can't guess ahead of time. You can't make this estimate as part of a planning phase or discussion or conversation. It really comes down to when you're going to do it. You say, or when you're going to commit to doing it. Okay, it's going to take about 10% of my time that I have to offer to this project. And I'm going to spend about, how much sweat from my brow, how much annoyance, how much reading do I have to do? And then how does my expertise figure into this? Because I come with certain amounts of knowledge. I may have no expertise, total beginner. I may be Linus Torvalds and we're doing a Linux patch. Like, yeah, I've done this before. I think I got it. So estimation and retrospection should take place at task time, not at planning time. Rather than story points, then, we can move the estimate and assessments to implementation and capture the three values: time, effort, expertise. Perhaps using something similar to, wait for it, torques. Similar. This is not an exact mapping. So this is just in the ideation stage at the moment. But consider the three inputs: time, effort, and expertise. Effort is the force applied to a rotating thing. You can maybe say a bicycle wheel, record on a record player. Do you know what that is? So effort is the force applied. The work, if you want, force times distance. I haven't done physics in a while. The force is applied at a particular radius, r cross f, or rf sine theta, if you like. So we'll just assume always perpendicular, because we're not really applying a force, which we can call expertise. So the radius is expertise. The more expertise you have, the more radius, the more mechanical advantage. So for the amount of effort that you apply to a particular task, the more expertise you have, the more movement you're going to get with your effort applied as a force at a radius based on your expertise. Does that make sense? So the more expertise, the longer the radius, the more torque for a given effort. Time is time, an indication of how much of a rotation is completed in an iteration. The rotation is sort of like the road to completion of the task. When you can call the task done, you can say that you rotated through one rotation. Maybe. Still a work in progress. This is the most difficult value to make sense in this approach, so we shall ponder this. But I'm kind of the mind that if time is mapped to like work time, like wall clock time, I spent 2 hours doing this. That's sort of useful, but that's really tied to effort and expertise. If time has a consistent base, like iteration time, then if our iteration times change, then the torque values would change. But if time is tied to completion, you'd almost say like the time is computed based on completion. So I complete the task. I put this much effort in at this estimated effort, right? How much of my effort was applied given my expertise? Different people can claim to have different expertise. So I'm a total beginner when it comes to JavaScript. Even though I've programmed in JavaScript before, I have not kept up with it. So I would give myself a score of 1 because I'm not horrible. Like 1 is unity. I'm just going to, whatever force is applied, it's at radius 1, so torque force. If I'm pretty accomplished as a JavaScript programmer, maybe it's a 2. If I'm Brendan Eich, maybe it's a 10, whatever. So you get a certain amount of rotation. At the end of maybe 3 iterations, a task is done. So you've gone through 1 rotation of this fictitious bicycle wheel. You could say, okay, so it was 3 iterations, that was 6 weeks, and you had this much effort and this much expertise applied during each of the iterations. So the time value is split per iteration across these different torque values. So you end up with 1 full rotation. So this is maybe overfitting the notion. So it's still something I have to think about. But torque is not a measure of skill, quality of work, or character, or anything else like these. It is literally a way to determine how much different individual how different individuals, not how different, how different individuals participating in an iteration might be able to complete parts of a component project or projects so that others will have some idea what could be done for the next iterations. So really that's what it comes down to. The main reason to do this is so that people can say, oh, you guys are moving along pretty quickly. I can see how much you're accomplishing based on who's participating. You can kind of spot the ones that are putting in more effort. Not a game, but you could say when you're assembling an iteration, oh, the 3 people that tend to accomplish the most are working on this iteration. Well, maybe I'll be able to keep up with them. You can count on a certain amount, and you can't wager money. But if you have high output, high performing people that are motivated and interested in contributing their volunteer vector, 3 elements, time, effort, and expertise. If you have people that are willing to contribute large values of those, then you will accomplish things. If you have fewer people that are not doing that, then if you're going to come along and say, well, I was going to try to accomplish 10 things, 10 tasks or whatever, but then they're just going to sit there for 2 months, then I don't want to spend my time. I can slow down my pace. So I think the idea is to not turn it into a game or a race, but to turn it into a pacing, right? Like if you've ever gone on a group bicycle ride or a group run, you don't need to be out in front of everybody. You don't want to be, 2 miles behind everybody. You kind of want to all be kind of moving along at the same pace. And then every iteration could be a little bit different pace. So really it's about pacing and finding some value in what you are contributing individually, what the team is contributing collectively. And so everybody doesn't feel like, oh, why am I way ahead of everybody or way behind? So that can be frustrating. It can be, can lead to feelings of frustration. Why am I spending my time on this, etc. Like with story points, we can use torques to balance task complication, not complexity, hopefully. Maybe split them into smaller tasks or consider others joining in, perhaps with more experience. The torque math is not hard to do, and it's slightly more concrete than story points, which are sort of vague and they're hard to visualize. But if you've ever ridden a bicycle, you kind of know what torques are. Believe it or not, you may not know the words. Since we are looking at tasks rather than stories, the actual implementations may be software development, schematic capture, content translation, other languages, user interface development, or who knows, graphic assets. It could be anything. And the list goes on. So now you've turned the estimation of what the pace is into something that's a little bit more tangible for the casual participant who doesn't like, what is a story point? I don't know. Oh, how much effort do you feel like you're going to give? And well, maybe there's some units like, maybe a value from just like bicycle gears, right? You don't need an infinite transmission. Let me see if I have water. Oh, I have water. Good. Hang on. You don't need to have infinitely many values. Expertise could be like a 12 or 18 speed bicycle. What gear ratio? Like what's the radius? How much leverage? How much torque multiplication are you getting with your expertise? Give yourself a value of 1 to 10 or 1 to 12 or something. Your effort is how much of your energy or effort is the word. How much of what you're willing to do total do you think you're going to be spending on this task or tasks? So the units on that are a little bit more tricky, but you'd have to see like you could convert that into a complexity measure, I suppose. This I'll have to think about as well. Like the units on it's a little bit more clear how effort and expertise fit together, but the units for the purposes of describing so that people understand this is why and this is how. So the units will be tricky on that. The time thing is still definitely a work in progress. Got to figure that out. So the torque approach will need some experimentation, obviously, especially with the integration of the volunteer time component, like I just said. So whether it should be a percentage of the iteration or some indication of actual time focused on a task, or like I said, maybe the fraction of the amount. So if you complete a task in 2 weeks, you can say the time was 1 iteration, or you could say it was 2 weeks. And that way you could map it across different iteration lengths. So that's still something to consider. The concept of torque can be illustrated with bicycle wheels, like I said, gears, pedal arms, chains. Doesn't have to be overly complicated, but it may be for some way of making the beginning estimate and end retrospective assessment easy is essential. So we don't get a pain point that's, I don't want to work on this. I don't want to have to do math. Like you shouldn't have to do math. These are still estimates at the end of the day, regardless of how. The what is estimate, and it's a known difficult problem. The most important thing, this measurement, like story points, is to be used for making the most of individual contribution, team contribution, and collaboration, especially so that volunteer participation can be valued. We shouldn't ever, especially volunteers working with other volunteers, you should never devalue or unvalue what other people are doing. So there should be some way of saying, oh no, I didn't see them doing work, but look very clearly. So it's almost like a receipt, sort of, but it really shouldn't be. But I have found in my travels that some people will not truly value the effort made by others. There's a very solipsistic view in some, like, oh, I don't feel like volunteering on this. I don't want to spend any more of my time on this. Well, because you're leaving, you're now costing other people their time that they've already contributed to this. So some way of sort of capturing that, you could, I kind of use, I'm shaping this analogy for Blind Man's Bluff. If you've ever played that card game, it's everybody gets one card and you hold it up on your forehead so you can't see the card, so you can see everyone else's card, but you can't see your own. And then you play some wagering. So you can see what other people are working on, but you don't always know how your effort fits into what they're doing. So that's some analogy that I'm kind of working on. But the take home, we're trying to make the most of the three elements, values, components, time, effort, expertise. You got to value the expertise, the volunteer time and effort and expertise that everyone is contributing, not just yourself. And feeling time was wasted does not make for eager return for another iteration. So there should be some way, just like your smartwatch, or how many laps, how long did it take me to walk the same exact route? You don't even need a smartwatch. You just have to say, oh, I'm walking a little bit faster now. I'm not feeling as winded perhaps, or I'm like some way of showing yourself, and for the sake of like feeling a part of the team, that pacing question, like, okay, I'm doing about the same as everybody else. So I feel pretty good. They should feel pretty good. They can see what I can see. So hopefully the outcome of that measurement will be kind of a reassuring notion. Like, okay, I feel like I'm accomplishing things, and I'm not putting in too much or too little, and I'm not letting people down. I'm not over promising and under delivering, or vice versa. But we definitely cannot make any scheme, whether it's points, and this can happen with story points like I've already described, or torques, or anything. We can't make it into a competition, some sort of grading. We can't make it implicitly any of those. Personally, it can be kind of that, but you don't want to put other people down. Hey, I noticed you didn't do as much work. Yes, but you also didn't notice that I had COVID, or my child graduated from school. Like, you can't automatically assume you understand completely the status of the time, effort, and expertise. So you can look at outcomes, and you can look at, however you want to measure. You can have actual communication might actually help in that regard. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's wrapped around the notion of metrics. Ultimately, the number one thing, and I think this is true of Agile also, but Agile for volunteers, the number one most important thing, communication. If you are volunteering for anything, it doesn't have to be any of these projects that we're working on. The example I love giving, and then we're getting to the end of this episode, so don't worry. The example I usually give is, suppose you volunteer to be a firefighter. Volunteer firefighter in your community, in your town, city. You volunteer. You say, yeah, I'm a volunteer firefighter. Woohoo, look at me. Got my selfie with my hat, my rubber boots, whatever. And then they say, hey, there's a fire. And you say, oh, what? Do I have to show up? I'm kind of busy right now. Like, yeah, but you said you were going to show up for when there's a fire, and there's a fire. Other people who are also volunteering their time to try to elevate our communities by putting out fires are depending on you to be a part of this. And you say, well, I thought I told you I was going to be on vacation for 2 months. No, you didn't. So now there's an empty bucket in the bucket brigade, and people are waiting for you to step up. So, communication is key. Story points and torques and issues and tasks and story, all this stuff are all tools to be used to basically communicate. And if anyone's a software engineer, or if you're doing anything with more than one person, some way of synchronizing efforts, try group juggling, try working in a kitchen on a line, being a line cook, try working in a fast food restaurant, work the kitchen by yourself. I've done that. So there's a variety of ways of looking at this, but essentially what it comes down to is coordination, collaboration, so that people that are contributing their time, volunteer time, effort, and expertise, feel at the end of some interval, a 2-week iteration. Like, yeah, that was worthwhile. I would do that again. You don't feel slighted. You don't feel taken advantage of. You don't feel like you were wasting your time, effort, expertise. So that's the deal. So that's where we are on taking those measurements and making use of them. It's kind of tricky, right? Like your smartwatch should be telling you you're doing great. You're hitting your 2 million steps. You're getting a little bit faster. Your heart rate's a little bit lower. All good. But when it says, but your friends are doing better than you, that's when it gets a little, that's not as good. So the idea is to be a positive force, to make collaboration something that can be justified to oneself. And again, the pacing example is probably the best one I've come up with. You just want to know that you're running with the pack. You're all in it at about the same amount of work. You're going to be about the same amount of tired because you're all traveling about the same distance at the same pace. So that's where we'll leave it for today. Thank you for listening, of course. Don't forget to visit our website, innovateforvegas.org, or even more interesting, especially as I roll out the Agile for Volunteers stuff across all of our different initiatives. They used to be called projects, now initiatives. I have to build out a couple of things that I realized when we were getting ready for this first iteration. But all of this is always a work in progress. Everything is a work in progress. But you can check out our GitHub organization with its repositories. You can check out Project Act because eventually, and these are again in the episode description links, wherever you found this audio program. Project Act will be very interesting to connect people who are not working on projects all the time. So if we want to stick with the running and the pacing example, someone from, 2 states over, other side of the country, might say, hey, I would like to run with you guys, but I run backwards and I like running at night. And they may say, well, we don't run at night, but you can run backwards during the day. And okay, well, I can do that. So they can figure out how they're going to keep pace and all that stuff. If you have a compatible way of keeping pace with each other, you don't all have to be working together every single day, which is one of the assumptions or presumptions in Agile. So this is a non-trivial pursuit. And the idea is to make it comfortable, a little bit more transparent about how volunteer time fits into the big picture of civic volunteerism and working on civic projects, community elevation projects. And that's what this is all about. So that's it. I wanted to share the thinkings on how we measure work and effort, time, effort, expertise, and keeping that pace. So thank you, as always, for listening. And I'll leave it there for now. Take it easy.